Hola. Well, today there's less than a week left of class. It seems like the time has gone awfully quickly, although it's certainly been a lot of work. I'm sure you'll agree to that. Well, we have two more assignments that need to be completed. One is due on Sunday, and that is the risk management plan. We've already covered that in the last podcast, so I'm not really going to say too much more about that. But we also then have the final report. And I thought I would talk about that in this podcast. This may be the last one, although it's possible I may do one after the class is over just to summarize everything. But in any case, this will be the last one dealing with a weekly assignment. And so let's begin. We have a template for it. Please use the template. Some of you have had problems because you've tried to use other software or the same software but not using the template. So be sure you use the template. Okay? When you're using the template, also be sure that you replace any of the generic wording with your own. For example, project template is not going to impress me a whole lot. What I'd like to know is what is the name of your project. So in template right here, what I would suggest is that you put the name of your project. And where it says student name, for heaven's sakes, don't leave that student name. Put your name in there. This is not MBA 515, but it's AD 509. And the instructor is not Thor Bostrom. So make sure that you make those changes. What I think you should do is think about this as not just an assignment for an MBA class, but think about it as an assignment that you would be doing for your boss at work. And obviously you would like it to be impressive, and part of being impressive is not only having the right information, but also a readable, professional-looking format. So let's try to do both of those things in this assignment. You'll see it says Project Charter. This is very similar to the Project Charter in that it incorporates all kinds of information. Again, where it says agency slash organizational name and project name, you'll replace those as you will with version and revision date. I would assume this is version number 1, but you can put whatever number in there you'd like. And the revision date, again, I'm not going to be particular about that. And then put in the name of the approver, the title. Obviously, you'll leave the signature blank, but put in the date. And again, I don't care exactly what date it is, but just make sure that you put something in there. Then we come to the contents. This is very similar to the Project Charter template, and I can't believe how many of you didn't put page numbers in and left the right margin rather jagged, and it didn't look very professional. So now these page numbers probably won't be right because as you begin to fill in information, you'll expand it. It will probably be longer than 9 pages. So make sure you have the right numbers in there, and that these titles correspond to the items. They should, but it's always helpful to double check. The next page is the project overview. Now, most of this information, in fact, almost all of it, comes from your weekly assignments. So there shouldn't be anything new to do here. You had a problem statement assignment, so you can put your problem statement in there. At least the current state and the future state. When you get the project description, that becomes that third part of the problem statement. Project goals and objectives. Again, that comes from the project charter. Now, one thing I might emphasize is most of you had some difficulty with the problem statement. And if you didn't make improvements, that is, if you put the same thing down in 1.1 and 1.2 that you did in that assignment, you'll probably get the same grade. So if you would like to do better, you have to make some improvements. Okay, and that's true all the way along. Is don't hand in the same assignment that you handed in earlier if you want a better grade. Okay, project scope. The, I kind of like this. I think in some respects it should be in the project charter, but it says describe the project scope. The scope defines the project limits and identifies. Now this is all template wording, so obviously you're going to take this out and you're going to put in the project includes, and you're going to list the major deliverables. Obviously a project is going to have one major output, but there may be some interim deliverables along the way. And so I would list, two, three, four of those. You can expand this if you need more. But the other thing is that here's a section where it says the project excludes. And what I like about this is that sometimes, for example, there's a misunderstanding between the project team and the customer as to what the deliverables are. For example, let's suppose that the project is to develop a e-commerce website. Okay, the client may assume that you're going to include training personnel on how to use it. And if you are, that's great. But if you aren't, if that's not part of the project, then you might want to put in here training is excluded. That is an project exclusion. Now, the thing I like about that is that, first of all, it clears up any ambiguity concerning whether or not there will be training. And then the other thing is that it gives the company the opportunity to say, well, if you want training, we can provide that at an additional cost. So remember our triple constraint triangle. We aren't going to stretch the scope side without also altering one or both of the other two sides. So what we're going to say is, and if you want that, here's how much it will cost. Now I don't know that you need to work that in here, but and you may not have any exclusions, but it's an exclusion is simply something that somebody might reasonably assume that you're going to do, but it's not part of the proposal. Okay, critical success factors, things that have to happen in order for the project to be successful. 1.6 is assumptions. And we talked about assumptions. You put assumptions into the project charter. Most of you had some difficulty with the idea of assumptions, so let me just very quickly reiterate. An assumption is something we believe to be true. And the key word here is believe. In other words, we don't know if it's true, but we believe it to be true. And the success of the project depends on the fact that it is true. So, for example, if we're in a construction project, we're going to assume that there will be no rain delays. We will assume that there won't be a strike, that is a labor-related delay. And the reason why we put those assumptions in there is because if one of those things does occur, then we're not responsible for the fact that the project doesn't finish on time or that it goes over budget. But I think many of the things that you listed as assumptions really weren't assumptions. Like, for example, things like for a website, one of the assumptions is, well, people will use it. Well, we can do prototypes and we can test it, so we don't have to assume whether or not people are going to use it or not. Most of the assumptions are about things that have to do with the future that are unknowable. In other words, there's no way that we can know for sure whether or not the weather is going to be cooperative, 6 months from now, or 3 months from now, that there will not be some kind of labor unrest, or perhaps that a vendor goes out of business. I mean, that's not something that's really knowable. Okay, so those are the kinds of assumptions that legitimate assumptions that we're going to make, and we're going to list those here. And there might only be two or three, or there could be 14 or 15. I think, given the size of your projects and so forth, I think two, three, four is probably about as many as you're going to have. And then constraints. It says describe any project constraints being imposed in areas such as schedule, budget, resources, products to be reused, technology to be employed, products to be acquired, etc. Okay. Um, you listed the constraints in your project charter. Some of those were quite legitimate. Some of them I had questions about, but so review those before putting them in here. But a constraint is just simply something that you have to work with that's going to constrain what you do. For example, I'm involved with a bridge project right now. In fact, this bridge happens to be just down the street, and it comes to close to where I live. Um, when we were getting involved in letting the contract for the bridge, one of the constraints in the project was that we would be able to continue to use the old bridge while the new one was being constructed. Okay, that was a pretty serious constraint, because it means that they couldn't build it in the same place. In other words, they couldn't tear it down and build the new one where the old one was. They had to build it side by side so that the old bridge can continue to be used. I mean, that's just one example. But constraints, you'll always have cost constraints, schedule constraints. Maybe there's a deadline. The project has to be done by a certain date. These are all typical project constraints, and you'll want to list those in 1.7. Okay, now we get into Section 2, Project Authority and Milestones. The funding authority is something that sometimes people have difficulty with. This particular charter was developed to accommodate all kinds of projects, including projects that are much bigger than the typical project that you would use for an MBA class, for example, your projects. So some of this may not seem entirely relevant, but under funding authority, basically we want to know who's going to pay for it. Is it going to come out of your department funds? Are you charging an external customer for it? Is this was something in your departmental budget? Or maybe it was in the organization's budget. It was a part of the capital funding program. Just who's going to pay for it? The oversight authority, it says here, describe management control over the project. Well, the project manager obviously has immediate oversight, but there may be a project sponsor who's going to play an active role. Your organization may have a project management office, but just simply describe how you're going to control the project. 2.3 is major project milestones. Now, in your Gantt charts, very few of you use milestones except a start project and end project. And we don't, here in 2.3, we don't need to include those because they really aren't, they're more for management purposes. They're not really critical to the customer. The type of milestones that might be included here might include things like, maybe if we're say we're doing a piece of we're going to manufacture a piece of equipment. Well, we have to design the equipment before we can manufacture it. So we might have a design phase, and the design phase, the end of the design phase would be a milestone, and the deliverable would be the design. And then maybe the next phase is engineering, where the engineers test it out and figure out how to actually manufacture it. And so then we might have a set of protocols or procedures that would be the outcome. But engineering phase complete would be the milestone. And then we might have another milestone when manufacturing is complete, and so forth. But most of you probably won't have more than 2 or 3 major project milestones. given the size of your project. I mean, theoretically, it's even possible that you won't have any, but I think it's probably a good idea to put in at least one or two, provided, of course, that they make sense. Okay, section number 3. This is the project organization. The project structure. Describe the organizational structure of the project team and stakeholders. This will be very similar to what we described before, but whereas in the previous section where we talked about project oversight authority, that's obviously going to be having to do more with control. Whereas here, under project structure, we're going to have people, stakeholders who are not in control, but they're part of the project structure. So it'll be similar, but it won't be identical. And then roles and responsibilities. It says summarize roles and responsibilities for the project team and stakeholders identified in the project structure above. So anybody listed in 3.1 needs to be listed in 3.2, and what their responsibilities are. Again, some of those responsibilities may be direct. Some of it may be consulting. In fact, you could use the RACI from our responsibility assignment matrix, although keep in mind that the next 3.3 actually is a responsibility matrix. This is not exactly the same as the one that you turned in for your assignment. And the difference here is that we're not looking for a full work breakdown structure. We're only looking at major milestones. In this particular case, what I might suggest is that you just put in your major summary tasks or subprojects. Don't go down to the work package level. So this way you'll only have, maybe between, say, 3 and 7 or 8 items, and that will make it much more workable. Okay, so don't go all the way down to the work package level on 3.3. 3.4 is project facilities and resources. Describe the project requirements for facilities and resources such as office space, special facilities, computer equipment, and so forth. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Again, of course, you'll also remove the template wording when you do that. And then points of contact. And again, this will be the project manager, the project sponsor, and so forth, their name and title, phone number, and email. So fill all that in. And then section 5 is the glossary. There may be some terms in your project that or acronyms, abbreviations that you might put in here just so that if somebody who's reading this is not intimately familiar with the project, they won't have to wonder what those letters stand for or what that word means. Most of you probably won't have very many items to put in the glossary. And we have the revision history. Okay, again, I would assume this is version 1. You can put in whatever date you want. And you would probably put your own name, and under description you might put project manager or whatever. I'm not too concerned. The most important thing is don't ever leave anything blank, because if you do, the assumption is that you didn't see it, you didn't finish filling it out. So for example, up here, if you have nothing to add to the glossary, just put in none or NA or something to indicate that in fact you have read it, but you chose not to put anything in there. Okay, so that's section 6, the revision history. Section 7 is the appendices. What I would like you to do in the appendices is I'd like you to put 3 things. First, I would like you to put in the work breakdown structure. Now keep in mind, even now as we're almost done with the course, some of you still have work breakdown structures that need work. So be sure that whatever comments that I've made, that you take that into consideration, because you want to do better on this assignment than you did on the last one. So put in the work breakdown structure. The second is the Gantt chart. And again, I would like the Gantt chart to be done in MS Project, in Open Project, or in Merlin. Although for this assignment, because this is a Word template, um, it will be permissible to embed a PDF, for example, in here, or do a screenshot if you can make it legible enough to read. Okay? And then lastly, the risk management plan, the assignment that's due on Sunday. So this will be due by midnight on Wednesday. And as I say, I have not heard back yet, so I'm not sure exactly when I have to turn in the grades, but I'm assuming that it's Friday by close of business based on past trimesters. And that's going to be a real chore because there are a sufficient number of outstanding assignments. And although I'm spending just about all day grading assignments, it's very hard to keep up. So if you turn in any back assignments um, after this weekend, I may not have time to grade them before it's time to turn in the grades. So that's kind of I guess a way of saying make sure you get in any late assignments before Sunday night. So I don't have anything more to say about this other than do your best, make it look professional, provide the information. Um, whatever information you take from past assignments, make sure that you've reviewed them to make whatever improvements are necessary. And when you're done, upload it to Blackboard, and that should do it. So, well, I know that many of you have not done an online course before, and this is the first time that I've actually taught a totally online course. Most of the courses I teach at cities are partially online, but this is the first time it's been, well, except for our first class meeting, totally online. And I think we've all learned a lot, and I'm sure we'll all do even better next time. But I think it's gone better than I had expected, and it's certainly been fun having the opportunity to work with you and see you improve your project management skills. And as I said, this will probably be the last weekly podcast, but I'll try to do one late next week just to kind of wrap everything up that we've done over the session. So with that, I am going to go ahead and sign off and see you later.